Richard Quigley.
My constituent, Ollie Bennett, is currently wanted by Interpol for an alleged crime in Morocco 3 decades ago. Ollie has always maintained his innocence, and following a debate in this place, his crewmate was granted a full royal pardon for the same charges. Ollie, however, was not. In December, he was arrested and detained in a French police cell. Though he is now safely home, Ollie remains at risk of arrest each and every time he goes abroad. The irony, Mr. Speaker, is that the Moroccan authorities have never filed to extradite Ollie, yet a Moroccan-sponsored Interpol red notice for Ollie remains active. Will the Minister commit to meeting with me to ensure that Ollie can access the support he needs to successfully appeal this red notice and to finally end this 30-year-long Groundhog Day?
Minister.
My honourable friend is a committed advocate for his constituents. I'd be very happy to meet him. As he will know, it's a matter of long-standing policy and practice that the UK can neither confirm nor deny the existence of an Interpol alert in a public forum to protect legitimate criminal justice inquiries, but I'd be delighted to meet my honourable friend.
For the Messenger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Government recently informed me that it's received 64 Category 2 Type B extradition notices under Section 70 of the Extradition Act 2003, of which 56 have been certified. Fewer than 5 of those come from Bangladesh. Can the Minister confirm how many of those relate to members of this House, and whether there are any Interpol red notices that also apply to members of this House?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member will have heard the point I've just made, which is it is a long-standing matter of policy and practice that we do not confirm Interpol notices in public.
Ruth Gabry.
Question number 3, Mr. Speaker.
Foreign Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I also join the tributes to Her late Majesty the Queen? With permission, I will answer questions 3, 8 and 21 together. UN OCHA reports over 2,500 Palestinians have been displaced by evictions, settler violence and demolitions this year alone. The UK is clear. Israeli illegal settlements and decisions designed to further them are a flagrant violation of international law. Our position is clear and unequivocal. The Israeli government must stop the expansion of settlements, stop the threats of forcible displacement and annexation, and stop the unacceptable levels of settler violence.
Ruth Gabry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Foreign Secretary for her answer, but does she not agree that it is long overdue to impose a full ban on all forms of trade and economic activity with these illegal settlements, and to prevent UK businesses, the public sector and charities from having any such dealings with them?
Well, my honourable friend will know that goods from illegal settlements are already not entitled to tariff preferences under the UK-Israel agreement or the agreement with the Palestinian Authority. And we are also deeply concerned by the reports of the decision to establish 34 new settlements to add to the 68 settlements since this Netanyahu government came to office, and the E1 settlement proposals, which are completely wrong. We will continue to work with our partners internationally to keep the pressure on the Israeli government on this issue.
Jeff Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. But tariff preferences are one thing, but we have to do whatever we can. I know we can't solve this problem alone, but we need to do whatever we can to put pressure on the Israeli government to stop. So I think the Israeli government are using the fog of war over Iran to make a Palestinian state unviable by the expansion of these settlements. So what more do they have to do before we will take action and actually ban settlement trade?
Well, my honourable friend will know we have already introduced 3 packages of sanctions related to settler violence in the West Bank, including measures against cabinet members in their personal capacity for their incitement of violence. We continue to look at the issue of sanctions, but he is right to point out that the issue is an issue fundamentally about the two-state solution and also risks undermining the Gaza peace process as well. The UK recognised the state of Palestine in September directly to support the viability of a two-state solution that continues to be at risk.
Foster.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, after the destruction of Gaza and the deaths of in excess of 72,000 Palestinians, it is evident that the Israeli government have not only turned their attention to Lebanon and Iran, but also the West Bank. In the West Bank, there are now daily reports of extreme violence and death, as well as the forceful eviction of Palestinians and the continued expansion of illegal Israeli settlements. This is not only immoral, it is yet further evidence of illegal Israeli government-sponsored activity. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that this violence in the West Bank must stop immediately, as well as the continued expansion of the illegal settlements? Can she also assure this House that despite the continuing conflicts in Ukraine, Lebanon, Iran and Sudan, the government is very much still focused on Gaza and the West Bank? Thank you.
Well, I do agree with my honourable friend on this. The number of settler attacks has reached new heights. There were more attacks in 2025 than in any year since the United Nations started recording such incidents more than 20 years ago. I do agree with him. These attacks are horrendous. They must stop. And I have continued to raise this directly with the Israeli government, with our international partners as well. And I also agree with him that in the end, all of the work that is rightly being done to get progress and talks in Lebanon, all of the work that is being done to find stability elsewhere in the Middle East will be badly undermined and will topple over if there is not action over the West Bank.
Monica Harding.
Mr. Speaker, alongside the West Bank, more than 1 million people in Lebanon have been forcibly displaced. The Guardian has reported Israeli strikes on medical facilities in Nabateh, killing health workers and ambulance crews, noting that such incidents are becoming increasingly common. The UN is clear that the forced displacement of civilians and the targeting of civilian infrastructure may constitute war crimes and crimes against humanity under international law. So what concrete measures is the UK government putting in place to ensure Israel ceases the targeting of civilian infrastructure and forcible displacement in Lebanon?
Secretary.
Well, the honourable member will know that we called for the ceasefire to be extended to Lebanon. We also condemned the escalation of Israeli airstrikes that took place. We have also strongly condemned the Hezbollah attacks on Israel, which must stop. And the issue here is that it was exposed very clearly at the beginning of this conflict that Hezbollah was simply being a proxy for Iran and not being the representatives in any way of the Lebanese people. And that is why the talks between the Lebanese government and the Israeli government are so important. The ceasefire is also incredibly important. However, this huge displacement has devastating humanitarian consequences. That's why the UK is providing additional funding, but people must be able to return safely to their homes in Lebanon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Israel is acting illegally in supporting settlement expansion. Israel is acting illegally in committing genocide in Gaza. Israel is acting illegally in attacking Lebanon and Iran. All of these, as the Secretary of State herself says, are flagrant violations of international law. She says we must put pressure on Israel, but she is doing nothing. Time and again, she and her ministers come here, condemn, but take no action. When will she ban settlement trade? When will she stop all military cooperation with Israel, which is conducting these illegal attacks? When will she take action?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, the UK government has taken a series of measures, including introducing sanctions against cabinet members in the Israeli government. We have taken action around those sanctions and also around arms sales. We have also been maintaining continuous international pressure, working with allies, including around the negotiations on Lebanon, which we have been pressing for strongly, including directly with the Israeli government, directly with the Lebanese government, and directly with the US government, who have hosted these talks.
Shoka Adam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Whilst atrocities are being committed every single day against the Palestinians in the West Bank, including the killing of hundreds and hundreds of children, it is absolutely disgusting to learn that British citizens are being offered Palestinian land to purchase with virtually the same ease as everyday online shopping. Declassified UK has found that Israeli charity Shivat Zion is helping British citizens move to illegal settlements. This is not only breaking international law, but to rub salt into the wound, is also implicating British taxpayers in claiming UK gift aid. So can the Secretary of State assure this House that she will look into this matter urgently and sanction any organisation, charity or otherwise, complicit in Israel's illegal land grab?
Secretary.
No one should be building settlements, illegal settlements in the West Bank. It is essential that everyone abides by the international law. We would expect any organisation in the UK and people living in the UK to abide by international law. We maintain our position that these settlements are illegal under international law, and that is what will be maintained.
Dr. Rosanna Arlington.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The brutal suffering of Palestinians in the West Bank remains unchallenged. And the Norwegian Refugee Council has now exposed that for Palestinian women and girls, depraved sexual violence by Israeli soldiers and settlers is rampant. This is abhorrent. Can the Foreign Secretary tell us what she is doing to take a firm stand against this cruelty and commit to holding Israel to account for its heinous crimes against innocent Palestinians?
Well, I would say I know she has raised with me the Norwegian Refugee Council report and also crimes around violence against women and girls. I can tell her that we have made tackling violence against women and girls, including violence against women and girls in conflict, a priority now for the Foreign Office. We will take this immensely seriously because this it is a crime. It is the most horrendous use of violence as a weapon of war when we have seen this in conflicts across the world, and will continue to pursue this.
Neera Wilson.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. The Foreign Secretary has just reiterated that it is this government's stated objective and aim to recognise a Palestinian state. Yet there are members of the Israeli government who are saying that it is their policy to expand these illegal settlements in order to undermine a viable Palestinian state. So will she take firm action, ban trade with settlement goods, and look at further sanctions on members of the Israeli government and the Knesset who promote these illegal policies?
Foreign Secretary.
As she knows, we have already introduced 3 packages of sanctions related specifically to the settler violence in the West Bank, including against cabinet members. We do continue to look at the issue of sanctions. She will appreciate we do not discuss sanctions in advance, but we do continue to look at the issue of sanctions and to take immensely seriously the expansion of settlements. The decision that the UK took to recognise the state of Palestine in the autumn depends on progress in the Gaza and the peace process there, but also on ensuring that the West Bank can be a viable part of a Palestinian state.
Callum Miller, Liberal Democrats, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituents in Bicester and Woodstock have shared with me their concern that under cover of the war that he launched with Donald Trump, Benjamin Netanyahu's security cabinet is committing international war crimes in Gaza, the West Bank and Lebanon. As my colleague has just said, the government was right finally to recognise the state of Palestine, and yet the actions of the Israeli government in the West Bank are explicitly intended to destroy prospects of that two-state solution. And I'm deeply concerned that what the Foreign Secretary has laid out today is not enough to show the Israeli government that this government is serious about prohibiting that. So let me ask again, will the Foreign Secretary do everything in her power to ban all settlement goods from reaching the UK? And will she look again at measures to prohibit all UK individuals, businesses and banks from enabling illegal settlement?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, we do expect UK organisations, charities, businesses and individuals to abide by international law. We do also expect them to recognise that the settlements in the West Bank are illegal. In particular, the E1 settlement is blatantly breaking the law. We do expect UK organisations to abide by the law. There are already restrictions to prevent goods from illegal settlements benefiting from tariff preferences, and we do take immensely seriously engagement with those illegal settlements by UK businesses.
Well, it's Burscout.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question number 4, please.
Minister.
We have long been clear, Mr. Speaker, that the human rights situation in Iran is totally abhorrent. As I speak, the regime continues its repression, whether through executions, including of political prisoners and protesters, or through its ongoing internet blackout. January's crackdown was an appalling reminder of this regime's brutality. That's why we have sanctioned senior Iranian decision-makers and IRGC members for their rights violations and led the call for an urgent fact-finding mission at the Human Rights Council.
Speaker, and I thank my honourable friend for that answer. As was referenced, in January, the Islamic Republic unleashed hell on its own citizens with a brutal crackdown on civilian protests, which reportedly saw over 30,000 people killed and thousands arrested. And a subsequent UN Human Rights Council report found that many of Iran's actions may amount to crimes against humanity. So as these abuses continue with impunity, what steps is my honourable friend and the Foreign Office taking to hold Iran to account and ensure that any negotiated settlement includes clear enforceable commitments to end such atrocities?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for his commitment to these issues. I described our work on an Iran human rights resolution at the UN Human Rights Council. The Foreign Secretary has also spoken to her Iranian counterparts, Foreign Minister Arachi, on the 12th of January, setting out the UK's total abhorrence at the killings, the violence and repression, and urged the Iranian authorities to change course urgently. We continue to support negotiations between the US and Iran for a lasting resolution to this conflict.
Duncan Smith.
Mr. Speaker, these are not my constituents, but their family approached me, and I'm referring to Lindsay and Craig Foreman, who are now incarcerated in Iran in brutal circumstances, being tortured in many ways. Can I be clear with the government and in their response clear to us? Is it clear that the government is saying that they are not spies but innocent tourists, and publicly? And will they formally declare the detention as arbitrary? And what else can they do to try and draw attention to the plight of these two innocent tourists?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I have been in regular contact with the family of the Foremans. This is a terrible case. It is absolutely obvious that they were innocent tourists. That is clear to all concerned. We have made that point repeatedly to the Iranian regime. I have raised it on countless times with Iranian representatives, as has the Foreign Secretary with her counterparts. We will continue to pursue this case. It is an injustice.
To the Foreign Secretary, Dame Priti Patel.
Speaker, the barbaric regime in Tehran has murdered tens of thousands of people, of its own people, and it remains the world's foremost state sponsor of terrorism and is responsible for appalling anti-Semitism, including spying on British Jewish community. So can I ask the Minister, why did the government not stop Iran being appointed to prominent positions within the United Nations Economic and Social Council, like the United States did? And if Iran is found to be behind the disgusting attacks on Jewish sites in recent weeks in London, will the government move forward with prescription of the IRGC and acts against any financial institutions in the UK involved in funding the state-sponsored terrorist activity in the UK?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the appointment in the United Nations that she refers to was, as I understand it, a decision of the Asia-Pacific Committee. It was not a decision over which HMG had any role, and indeed it was, as I understand it, subject to an automaticity process rather than to a vote. We did not have an option to block this, though the Foreign Secretary did raise her concerns about this in the United Nations. She turns rightly to the malign role that Iran plays, not just domestically, as I described to my honourable friend, but internationally as well. They have, as has been said in this House before, they have continued to try and threaten communities in the UK, particularly British Jews. I have said in no uncertain terms to the Iranian representative, the ambassador here, that if British Jews are ever found to be harmed because of the action of the Iranian regime, we would treat that with the utmost seriousness that it deserves. We have sanctioned the entirety of the IRGC. We have more than 550 sanctions, and we have very capable security services here. When the Iranians seek to act in the UK, we do find them.
Chris Cotton.
Question 5, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I recently visited Ukraine again, Lviv and Kiev, and I saw again the brutal impacts of Russia's illegal war on the civilians and particularly the children of Ukraine. And that is exactly why, Mr. Speaker, we are determined to clamp down on the individuals and companies who are supporting Russia's war on Ukraine and the sources of revenue for that. We've imposed over 1,200 designations against Russia, including just 300 new sanctions in February. We've led international efforts to disrupt the shadow fleet, sanctioning almost 600 vessels. And collectively, Mr. Speaker, our efforts with other countries have denied Russia access to at least $450 billion since their full-scale invasion 4 years ago.
Chris Cotton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Friday, the United States agreed to extend the partial lift on sanctions on Russian oil exports. Does the Minister agree with me that this helps President Putin fund his illegal and murderous war in Ukraine, that it works directly against the national security interests of both Ukraine and the United Kingdom?
Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, the issues he refers to, of course, are for the United States, but we are very, very clear that we are going to continue to ratchet up the economic pressure on Putin to force him to come to the negotiating table and provide support to Ukraine. Our sanctions remain in place. We're continuing to work closely with others to increase that pressure, and we cannot allow the current global situation to result in any kind of bonanza for Putin. The Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary and myself have been very clear about that.
Joanna Baxter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The verified number of Ukrainian children stolen by Russia has increased and now stands at 20,570. In part, the increase in this verified number is the result of the tracing mechanism supported by this government, and would hope that work will continue. But last month, a report by the Yale Humanitarian Research Laboratory found that Russian state oil producers, Rosneft and Gazprom, have, over the past 2 years, been implicated in the forcible deportation and re-education of at least 2,158 of those children. Will the Secretary of State review and fully investigate those findings and, where appropriate, consider the imposition of further sanctions?
Well, she rightly as ever raises this absolutely crucial issue, and I was very privileged to be able to see for myself the incredible work that we're supporting on tracing what has happened to those Ukrainian children. The figure she states is correct, and it's absolutely appalling. I'm very proud of the work we're doing with other countries on that. I will certainly look at the issues that she's raised. We have already, of course, taken action against those oil companies that she mentions.
Wendy Morton, Shadow Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In recent months, Western sanctions have really been biting Putin, with the foundations of Russia's economy failing. But as we highlighted with OFSI in December 2025, concerns were reported that Russian crude reaching refineries, including one part owned by Lashmi Mittal, via shadow fleet vessels, showing that gaps remain. So will the government now lead efforts to crack down on these networks and press those refineries in Turkey, in China and in India to stop processing Russian oil?
Minister.
Well, she will know of the work we've already been doing on this crucial issue, and she's right to raise it. We've been very, very clear. Of course, under her government, there was a ban on Russian LNG imports, which we continued. We've gone further, and we've announced the intention to introduce a maritime services ban. And of course, the very issue that she raises, we're going to continue to coordinate with other international partners, and we cannot allow these revenues to be used to fuel these terrible actions by Russia.
That's right.
Question number 6, please, Mr. Speaker.
Foreign Secretary.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I will answer questions 6, 7, 16 and 19 together. I returned overnight from a series of meetings across 5 countries in Europe, the Middle East and Asia, and spoken directly with more than a dozen of my foreign minister counterparts, as well as joining the 50-country summit hosted by the Prime Minister and President Macron, because this is a critical diplomatic moment. The agreed 2-week ceasefire runs until Thursday, and we need it extended. We need the negotiations to reach a comprehensive conclusion to this conflict, and we need the reopening of the Strait with no conditions and no tolls. And our work is to maintain and build the biggest possible consensus around the rapid opening of the Strait.
That's sharp.
Thank you. Following reports that the Israeli military has published a map designating South Lebanese territory as a buffer zone, and its refusal to confirm whether displaced Lebanese families will be allowed to return, Can the Foreign Secretary tell the House what specific representations the UK government has made to Israel to ensure this does not become a de facto annexation? And does the Foreign Secretary agree that any permanent occupation of Lebanese sovereign territory would not only violate international law, but actively undermine the US-Iran talks being mediated by Pakistan?
Secretary.
My honourable friend is completely right. Lebanese people need to be able to return to their homes. These are their homes. It is a humanitarian disaster that so many people have been displaced from their homes. I have raised this issue directly with the Israeli government, and we have made continued representations and raised this in international forums as well. We also raised it with the US, who have been hosting the talks between Israel and Lebanon. It is hugely important that those talks progress, that the ceasefire is maintained, and Lebanese people can return home.
Sir Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituents in Tamworth are already paying the price for the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, with fuel costs soaring. My logistics sector are also facing the brunt of these fuel costs, which ultimately will get passed on to consumers. And whilst I welcome the Prime Minister's refusal to drag Britain into the United States' reckless war, what steps is the Minister taking to secure the reopening of the Strait and to bring down costs for my constituents in Tamworth and for the United Kingdom?
Foreign Secretary.
My honourable friend is right, because we did not get involved in the start of this conflict, but we will work to bring it to a close and do everything we can to get the Strait reopened, because this is affecting the cost of living back at home in her constituency and across the country and across the world. No country should be able to hijack international shipping lanes or hold the global economy hostage. That is why we have held repeated summits and meetings on the reopening of the Straits, and why we will continue to argue across the world for no tolls.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While energy giants and Wall Street banks cash in on the war, ordinary people pay the price. In the first month of the US-led war with Iran alone, the world's 100 largest oil and gas companies made more than $30 million an hour in unearned profit. What discussions has the Minister had with the Chancellor regarding the merits of introducing windfall taxes to directly fund a cost of living support package, making life more affordable for people and businesses across the UK?
Well, I can tell my honourable friend that the Chancellor is making a statement later this afternoon, because she has been focusing particularly on the issues around the cost of living and the importance of supporting people and businesses across this country during this global crisis. I would also say to him, the other concern I have is that Russia is seeking to benefit from this war and from this conflict. That is yet another reason why we need to get the Strait open as rapidly as possible.
Lee Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given President Trump's latest threats to destroy bridges and power plants, attacks that would be against international law, has the Foreign Secretary made representation to her US counterpart that threatening war crimes is not the way to achieve peace or to open the Strait? But more importantly, Mr. Speaker, if Trump does start to attack civilian infrastructure, will she withdraw US access to British bases?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, we have been clear from the start about the way in which the UK bases could only be used for defensive operations, not for offensive operations. There is currently a ceasefire in place, although that only runs until Thursday. It's why we badly need it extended. But I can also tell him that we raised, as part of the G7 discussions, which included the US, the importance of not attacking any civilian infrastructure. That was included in the agreed communiqué by the G7 and reflects the importance we attach to those issues.
David Mundell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Has the Foreign Secretary made any assessment of what impact the conflict is having on the situation in Yemen and the horrendous humanitarian situation there? And does she believe that in discussions to end the conflict, given Iran's continued support for the Houthis, that there would be some opportunity to make a positive impact on that conflict?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I can tell my honourable friend, the Minister for the Middle East, has met the Yemeni Prime Minister in recent days, exactly to engage with them and express our support to ensure that they can address humanitarian issues. There is obviously a particular issue around the Yemen where there are Iranian proxies that have been mobilised in the past, and it is important that that does not happen now. It's also another example of one of so many countries where vulnerable and low-income countries and conflict-affected countries are being the most heavily affected by the restrictions on the Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Foreign Secretary's push for consensus is to be welcomed, and hopefully the Straits of Hormuz will be opened shortly, and hopefully that will lead to short and medium-term progress. But in the longer term, would the Foreign Secretary agree with me that the lasting peace in the Middle East is more easily secured if we can take action against neighbouring states and elements within those states that threaten the absolute annihilation of the State of Israel?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, Israel's security needs to be protected. So does the security of Gulf countries that have been attacked as part of this conflict, and we need security right across the region. I would say to him, he says, we hope the strait will still be open, soon be open. We have proposed that as an immediate confidence-building measure, the Iranians should agree to the IMO's proposal to start moving the stranded ships and the stranded seafarers. They could get on with that right now, even while the negotiations are continuing. Get those ships moving, get those seafarers home. It's what the IMO has proposed, and we have been building international support to pursue that as an immediate step.
Vicky Slade.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The difficulties of ships passing through the Strait is leading to fears across all sectors and supply chains, including food production, and therefore the price of food is at risk as well as oil. Increasingly offensive and bizarre social media posts by President Trump are bound to be making diplomatic efforts more difficult and makes us worry whether anything he says can be taken seriously. So what steps is she taking to ensure that all parties are coming to the table in good faith?
Well, I met with the Pakistan Foreign Minister in the last few days. You'll know that Pakistan is obviously leading the mediation work as part of this. I have also spoken frequently to the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and we have been engaging with a whole series of countries. Even over the last few days, I have met with more than a dozen foreign ministers and counterparts to ensure that everyone is pressing the same messages as part of this process. We need the ceasefire extended, we need a swift resolution, but we must have the strait opened and we must have no tolls. Proposals around tolls have been circulating. That would be deeply damaging and it would go against the law of the sea.
Lebanon's humanitarian flash funds secured less than a third of the money that was actually required. 20% of the Lebanese population is currently displaced. 40,000 housing units have been destroyed. Lebanon is on the brink of economic collapse and social tensions are rising. So I thank the Foreign Secretary for the humanitarian support sent to date, including cash transfers, but I ask her to do more. Press for a real ceasefire, provide practical support to Lebanon's armed forces, help the state tackle negative influences trying to undermine its sovereignty, and finally, vigorously oppose the illegal expansion of Israel's buffer zone in South Lebanon.
Well, I can tell my honourable friend that the Middle East Minister was in Beirut at the end of last week, pressing exactly these points, engaging with the Lebanese Prime Minister. We see there's the urgency of the ceasefire, the need to work and support the work of the Lebanese armed forces and the Lebanese government, and it's why we have also provided £30 million of humanitarian support since the beginning of this crisis directly for Lebanon. I believe that makes us one of the biggest donors now to provide support for Lebanon, but we must continue to do so.
Tim Farron.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We know that a huge proportion of the global fertiliser market works its way through the Strait. That's obviously going to impact on food security and food prices in this country. It could also be devastating, causing famine in many countries in Africa and Asia. We are aware, University of Minnesota research shows that 762,000 people have died as a direct result of the US aid cut since January last year. Undoubtedly, some will have died because of our decision to cut our aid budget too. Is this the moment to do the right thing and increase our spending on international aid and to protect people from the calamity of famine?
Well, he will know, the honourable member will know from the statement that we made, we have focused our support particularly on the fragile and conflict-affected states. We are also working, including with the World Bank, to monitor those states that are most heavily affected by things like the fertiliser shortages, by things like the food supplies and oil supplies as well, which is having a huge amount of impact. Mr. Speaker, just to correct the point that I made about the 30 million being from the beginning of the crisis. As I understand it, 30 million is since the beginning of this year, 20 million is since the beginning of the crisis, the additional funding that we have provided for Lebanon. But that is part of Lebanon being one of the countries that we have ensured we are protecting to continue to invest and provide humanitarian support.
Number 9, Mr. Speaker.
Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, as I've said many times in this House, Diego Garcia is a key strategic military asset for both the United Kingdom, the United States and our allies, and ensuring its long-term operational security is and will continue to be our priority. We remain confident that the UK-Mauritius Treaty is the best way to defend the future of the base. We're obviously disappointed with the delay, which I set out the other day, but we'll continue to work with the United States and Mauritius on the way forward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Chagos are even further from my constituency than they are from Mauritius, which is saying something. But it's having a significant local impact because Hillingdon Council is now caring for hundreds of Chagosians fleeing to this country through Heathrow Airport to escape the consequences of the government's proposed deal, which is placing huge financial pressure on my local authority. So will he undertake to cancel this proposed UK-Mauritius treaty to bring certainty for the future of the base and to ensure that my constituents do not continue to bear the consequences of those forced to flee the government's actions?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I have a lot of respect for the honourable gentleman, but I have to simply disagree with the premise of what he says. Of course, Chagosians who have been coming to this country are coming because of the agreements made under the previous government for them to acquire British citizenship, which entitles them to come here. Support has been provided to councils. I've worked closely with the MHCLG on this issue, and if he has any further concerns or requests to make, he should, of course, do that through the usual channels.
Andrew Snowden, Shadow Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Last week, this feeble government limped to this House to announce that its shameful Chagos surrender bill was being ditched, a diplomatic failure entirely owned by this Labour government. Our friends and allies alike around the world were left bemused by the deal that this government came up with. And this week, this government has sent a team of officials to Mauritius. So can the Minister make it clear that that team have been told unequivocally to tell the Mauritius government that the deal is dead, the UK will be sending no money to the Mauritius government, and that the Chagos Islands will be remaining British?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, with the exception of when I broke my ankle before Christmas, I have never limped to this House on any occasion. And I came here with confidence to set out the reasons why this treaty was needed for our national security. Our officials engage regularly with not only Mauritius but the United States and other partners. And of course, this deal was welcomed by our allies, including our Five Eyes partners. So I simply don't accept what he said at all.
Good fortune.
Number 10, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I appeared yesterday before the Foreign Affairs Committee. I know the chair is in the House after the Chief Minister of Gibraltar to set out the process and engage in the very important scrutiny that this House provides on this matter. We are all committed to fully implementing and ratifying the treaty as soon as possible to realise its benefits for the people of Gibraltar. There's obviously a complex process. However, my understanding is that provisional application of the treaty will be possible from the 15th of July, which will secure the key benefits of the treaty for the people of Gibraltar Gibraltar, including the fluid border, allowing businesses and working people more certainty and prosperity.
Fortune.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd ask the House to note my relatively recent visit to Gibraltar, which is noted in my register of interests. Mr. Speaker, the naval base in Gibraltar is of high strategic importance, and the decision to allow the Spanish authorities to monitor equipment going to the British military is highly concerning. Would the Minister guarantee that this treaty, neither directly nor indirectly, will in any way limit operations, access or security of the UK naval base?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I can absolutely assure him of that. We would not have signed off this deal without those assurances. The Ministry of Defence, the Defence Secretary and others were fully involved at all stages of the process. We've been very clear that the treaty protects the operational autonomy of our military facilities, which will continue to operate unfettered as they do today.
Luke Akers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I congratulate the Government on this significant announcement. Does the Minister agree with me that it provides additional safeguards to Gibraltar's sovereignty whilst creating new economic opportunities for its people? And does he agree with those that anyone who has any concerns in this House should listen to the Chief Minister of Gibraltar, who knows better than anyone what is best for the people that elected him and that he represents?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I can assure him of that, and I think it's important to note that, of course, Gibraltar's sovereignty was never on the table in these negotiations. We've been very clear about that throughout, and this has been supported and worked through with the Government of Gibraltar throughout, and of course it was unanimously supported by Gibraltar's Parliament, and I think that's very important to note in this House.
Senator Minister Wennimore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister made a statement to the House on the 26th of February. Sadly, that has not been followed by the detail Parliament was promised. In his most recent answers to my written parliamentary questions, he now says the final treaty will be laid as soon as possible after EU processes conclude. Yet the Government of Gibraltar has stated it's due to provisionally come into force in July. So will the Foreign Secretary or the Minister now set out a clear timetable for implementation and confirm when Parliament will be given proper time to scrutinise the full details and guarantee that scrutiny under the CRAG process will take place before provisional application begins?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I set out yesterday, the timetable is not entirely in our control because, of course, this relates to the other party in this treaty, which is the EU and their processes. Mr. Speaker, you'll know, of course, that I brought forward the entire text of the draft treaty so that this House had a chance to scrutinise that. I've also provided briefings to the Honourable Lady and a Right Honourable colleague on this matter, as I have yesterday in the Foreign Affairs Committee. We will follow the CRAG process in the usual way. I will make sure the House is kept fully informed and is able to scrutinise as appropriate.
To Topicals, does Shah.
Topical question number 1, please, Mr. Speaker.
Foreign Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Prime Minister updated the House on the fact that UK security vetting recommended against granting vetting of Peter Mandelson and that FCDO took the decision instead to grant vetting. The Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary, the former Foreign Secretary and I should have been told that there was an issue, and I am very troubled that we were not. The result is that Parliament was not given all the information it should have been, and as I informed the Select Committee over the weekend, I've commissioned a review of all of the information provided, and I will write to the Chair further on this shortly. The Permanent Under-Secretary is no longer in post, and as the Prime Minister did yesterday, I want to recognise Sir Rolly Robbins' many years of dedicated public service. I also want to pay tribute to the FCDO and the incredible staff who work not just here in the UK, but across the world, promoting UK interests and values at an incredibly unstable time. That is what has made it possible for me to travel through 5 different countries in the last 6 days, pursuing international diplomacy. The scale of global insecurity impacting our economy and our national security will rightly continue to be the central focus of the FCDO and this ministerial team.
Okay. As the conflict in the Middle East has fundamentally demonstrated, modern warfare has evolved, with ballistic and hypersonic missiles capable of overwhelming traditional air defence systems, and with energy supplies, food security and critical goods increasingly weaponised as instruments of coercion. Can the Foreign Secretary set out what specific steps the Foreign Office is taking in coordination with the Ministry of Defence to ensure the United Kingdom is prepared for these threats to protect our people and our country?
Foreign Secretary.
My honourable friend is right to highlight the way changing technology and also the changing geopolitics and security threats that we face mean that we've also now faced very different kinds of threats to our country. It's why we're increasing the defence budget, but it's why we're also increasing the Foreign Office's work around hybrid threats and a range of hybrid threats, including cyber and others as well. We will need to continue to do so, and I suspect we will need to accelerate that work as well.
To the Foreign Secretary, Dame Bridge Patel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning we heard Sir Ollie Robbins say that there was a dismissive attitude and an atmosphere of pressure from Number 10 towards security vetting due to their desire to get Mandelson in post as soon as possible. Given Sir Ollie's account, why did the Foreign Secretary lose confidence in him last week when surely the Prime Minister passed the buck for his own failures and for his appalling judgment?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, the starting point of this was the appointment of Peter Mandelson. He should never have been appointed to that post. And the Prime Minister made that clear and has apologised, not just to the House, but more importantly, to the victims of Epstein. And that's where that apology should lie. But she will also know that there is a responsibility on ministers to provide accurate information to the House and to ensure that we get the information from officials as well. I do think that ministers should have been told, including the former Foreign Secretary and the Prime Minister, about this particular issue, about the outcome of the UK SV conclusions and their recommendation. I do think that was relevant, certainly to the information that should have been provided to the House in September.
Mr. Speaker, well, the Foreign Secretary, like the Prime Minister, will also be aware that Peter Mandelson was on the board of Sistema alongside Russian spies. So has she now checked if the concerns raised during vetting related to his business links with the enemies of the United Kingdom, including Russia and China? Has she asked for the details of the mitigations that Sir Ollie mentioned this morning, were they put in place around Mandelson? Does she know what compromise our enemies have on him? And is she reviewing all his activities as ambassador for any compromise of UK national security?
So, let me tell her I have been informed of the conclusions of the UK security vetting report and assessment and its recommendation. I have not seen the detailed content of the UK security vetting report, and I do think there is a distinction between the individual personal information that is provided and the conclusion and the recommendations it provides. However, she will also know that the Prime Minister has instigated a full investigation into this entire process and into what was known, and also into the whole vetting process as well by Sir Adrian Fulford, and information is being provided to the ISC as well.
Oliver Rao.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm worried that despite this government historically recognising a Palestinian state, there will never be one if the West Bank is annexed further and Netanyahu knows it. 56 new illegal West Bank settlements were approved by Israel in 2025, and since the Iran war began, 78 violent attacks have occurred in over 148 West Bank Palestinian settlements. People are being killed, thousands displaced, families and children attacked and threatened. What more can the UK do to pressure, to sanction, to stop this annexation and to stop this violence?
Minister.
I know the commitment of my honourable friend to these issues and the concern in Burnley about them. I raised exactly these concerns about the West Bank, both with counterparts from the United States, from the Board of Peace and the High Representative of them yesterday, but most importantly also with the Palestinian Prime Minister, who is doing everything that he can in order to ensure that the people in the West Bank are protected from violent settlements. They have expanded at a historic rate. They are a subject of deep controversy, both in Israel, but of course in this House as well. And we will continue to raise these issues with the seriousness that they deserve.
Callum Miller, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning at the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, the committee learned that officials in Number 10 put pressure on the FCDO to find a job as ambassador for Matthew Doyle, a close friend of a convicted sex offender. Does the Foreign Secretary see any pattern here? Does the Foreign Secretary find it incredible that Number 10 told FCDO officials not to tell her predecessor about this? Will she commit to investigate and publish all records held by the FCDO about this proposal from Number 10? And is she concerned that political decisions by Number 10 about FCDO staffing have grossly eroded trust and morale among her hard-working civil servants?
Foreign Secretary.
So, obviously, I was the Home Secretary at the time that understand this has taken place, so I was not involved and don't know the circumstances. I am, of course, extremely concerned at any suggestion that the Permanent Secretary or Permanent Undersecretary of the Foreign Office would be told not to inform the Foreign Secretary. I can also confirm that the case that he raised, it would not have been an appropriate appointment as well. But let me also respond to the wider issue that he raises, because I, as I said in my opening topical statement, will pay tribute to the phenomenal dedication of people who work right across the Foreign Office, who work with me every single day at a time of immense global instability, and they are continuing to work with huge dedication on pursuing UK interests and UK values, because that's what makes us stronger at home.
Mitchell Blake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, the UK attended the third international conference on the situation in Sudan, with Germany, France, UK, US, the African Union and the European Union. Our own report from the Foreign Office reports 13 million people are requiring humanitarian assistance, and the estimated 130 humanitarian workers have been killed. What did the conference and the summit say about humanitarian corridors to give us some confidence that there can be humanitarian assistance going forward?
I'm glad my honourable friend has raised this. In Berlin last week, with my German, French, US, EU and African Union co-hosts, we called for an urgent ceasefire, humanitarian truce, humanitarian access. It is deeply distressing that this conflict is continuing. We also had participants pledge over £1 billion to support the humanitarian response, including 146 million of UK humanitarian for Sudan funding this year, and increasing the support to local aid groups. But it is desperately urgent that we get the ceasefire, because this is the worst humanitarian crisis of the 21st century.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Foreign Secretary has paid tribute to Sir Ollie Robinson on a number of occasions. So in that case, can I ask, what were the grounds for his dismissal? And what was contained in his dismissal letter? And was he allowed to state a case against that sacking?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, as the Prime Minister set out yesterday, we do believe that ministers should have been informed that the UK security vetting recommendation was against granting developed vetting to Peter Mandelson. This is significant and important information. It should have been disclosed to the Prime Minister at the time, and it should also certainly have been disclosed to me at the time when I was answering specific questions from the Select Committee that was particularly about security concerns and what the response had been to them. As the Prime Minister has said, he did speak to Sir Ollie before making the decision.
Dave Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituents across Lichfield, Burntwood and the villages are obviously concerned about the situation in Iran, but also about its impact on the cost of living at home. What steps is the Department taking to ensure that commodities like fuel, including red diesel and fertiliser, are able to reach market and keep prices from rising further?
Foreign Secretary.
The most immediate urgent thing we need to do internationally is to get the Strait of Hormuz reopened. That is what I have been pursuing in a diplomatic series of meetings over the last few days across 5 different countries with 12 different foreign ministers, and domestically the Chancellor will be making a statement shortly.
Will Forster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Many of my constituents in Woking are really concerned that the world's attention is on Trump's illegal war in Iran. Whilst that is happening, Netanyahu is annexing land in Gaza, Lebanon and West Bank. Following Viktor Orban's defeat in Hungary, the EU is meant to be agreeing to take a tougher line on Israel. Will this country join them?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I want to reassure this House that this government has not taken its eye off events in Lebanon or indeed Israel and Palestine. That's why I was in Beirut last week with the Lebanese Prime Minister, the President and various others, why I was in Brussels yesterday with the Palestinian Prime Minister and a range of other key actors. Clearly what the European Union does is a matter for them. We have taken a series of steps in the way that the Foreign Secretary has already set out, and Mr. Speaker, we will keep those under close review.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I recently met with a young woman from Somaliland in my constituency who has lost 14 members of her family in recent years to fighting in the region. She and other campaigners from Somaliland are understandably reticent to use the new e-visa system introduced by the Somalian government due to fears around privacy and data protection. Will the Minister raise these questions with her counterparts in the Somalian government to ensure Somalian landers can travel to their country without fear?
Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I thank my honourable friend for her question and offer my condolences to her young constituent. The British Embassy in Mogadishu have raised e-visas with the federal government of Somalia and will provide further updates through travel advice in due course as necessary. We do continue to raise these issues and call for peaceful talks in relation to bringing about a sustainable peace in Somalia.
Ben Maguire.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week marked 3 years since the start of Sudan's ongoing civil war, which has sparked a disastrous famine affecting an estimated 34 million people, while around 14 million have been displaced. What is the government doing to combat the reported obstruction of aid delivery by the RSF, SAF and other warring factions that is further worsening this monumental humanitarian crisis?
Secretary.
We discussed this issue directly at the Berlin conference, and I agree with him. To be honest, I think that the international community has failed the people of Sudan, that this war continues in the most horrendous circumstances, and we have urged anyone who is able to put pressure on the RSF and the SAF that they must allow humanitarian access to people who desperately need it.
Brittle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Businesses in my Bolton West constituency, including trailer manufacturer Indispension, are labouring under a mountain of repetitive, costly and unnecessary paperwork because the last government failed to negotiate a regime for mutual recognition of conformity assessments. What can the Foreign Secretary say about the progress she's made with the Paymaster General in removing the Brexit barriers to trade that are holding back British businesses abroad?
Minister.
Well, he raises very important questions on behalf of his constituents, and our long-term national interest and indeed interest of businesses in his constituency require a closer EU partnership anchored in the common understanding. We're tackling trade barriers. My colleague, the Paymaster General, working very hard on these issues. We're continuing to discuss the challenges faced by manufacturers on both sides, as well as CCA implementation at the trade specialised committees. And the further summit that we're going to have later this year will have a chance to discuss many of these issues.
Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ministers will be aware that Ashab al-Yamin have claimed responsibility for the terrorist attacks across northwest London on Jewish synagogues, places of worship, businesses and homes. This is a group that takes its orders direct from Iran and from the IRGC. So what action have ministers taken to call in the diplomats from Iran and expel them because they are instructing terrorist attacks on our citizens?
Minister.
As the honourable member may know, I have repeatedly summoned the Iranian ambassador, both about concerns about what goes on in the UK. There are some elements of the alleged attacks in the UK which are still sub judice, but I would want to leave him in no doubt about how forcefully we have raised these points with the Iranian ambassador and indeed with the Iranian regime.
Dick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, constituents involved in my local Rotary Club have contacted me about the global polio eradication programme. Now, I'm reliably advised that ministers want to concentrate resources for the best impact. So can the Minister reassure my constituents that the UK remains determined to protect these important gains made in polio eradication for the future?
Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank him for his question. I can offer that reassurance and pay tribute to Rotarians who have worked for over so many decades for the eradication of polio. We will continue to support global polio eradication directly until December 2026, and then we will use support for our polio eradication fund through £248 million of fully flexible core funding to the WHO between 2025 and 2028. We do remain utterly committed to eradicating polio around the world.
Lisa Smart.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Last month, the Rycroft Review confirmed the UK faces persistent and strategic interference from hostile states and warned that our defences against information warfare are worryingly weak. With important elections across the country in 2 weeks' time, including in my own Stockport Council area, What steps is the government taking, working with our allies, to prevent disinformation from overseas aimed at those participating in UK elections?
Minister. Well, she raises a crucially important issue. I work very closely with the Security Minister and others on these matters. Our electoral system is highly resilient, and to date we've not seen evidence of successful Russian interference in UK democratic processes. But we know that the Kremlin is seeking to sow discord in the West and in the UK and undermine our institutions, and we are working on a series of measures to ensure that they cannot achieve that foothold in our society or our democracy.
Very clearly forward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On January the 1st, Israel revoked the licences of 37 international NGOs working in the occupied West Bank and Gaza. The United Nations Human Rights Chief called the suspensions outrageous, making an already intolerable situation even worse for the people of Gaza. What is the Minister doing to ensure the Israeli government allows life-saving aid to enter Gaza, that it reverses the suspensions of the licences, and that aid and humanitarian relief is not politicised or weaponised by the Israeli government?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we have continued to raise the vital importance of all of the necessary aid getting into Gaza. It is welcome that over the last week the amount of aid that has gone in has increased, but it is still not adequate to the need. Restrictions directly, repeatedly with the Israeli government, and we will continue to do so. It is vital that aid gets to the people who need it.
Brendan O'Hara.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the UK consider a state to be a democracy? And would it continue normal diplomatic relations with that state were it to introduce a differential death penalty, one which was based on ethnicity?
Minister.
I think the honourable member refers to the legislation passed in the Israeli Knesset. We oppose the death penalty everywhere. On the 29th of March, we joined with many of our friends across the world to condemn this specific measure, and the Foreign Secretary has raised it specifically with the Israeli Foreign Minister. I can leave the House in no doubt about our opposition to these measures.
Dame Emily Thornbridge, Chair of the Select Committee.
Very much. May I associate myself with the comments of the Foreign Secretary with regard to the Foreign Office and its dedication and hard work of its officials? We are particularly, at a time like this, in need of a Foreign Office that's absolutely at the top of its game, not just in this country but across the world. But the Foreign Affairs Committee's concerns remain about security more than anything else, and the impact of employing Peter Mandelson is something which causes us great concern. During his time being, my honourable friend, I know, has been taking evidence on this issue, and I know has raised issues around security. Can I tell her that we take the issue around security extremely seriously? She will also know that there is a police investigation which is underway, which raises some of these issues, and she will appreciate, I do not want to say anything that would cut across that, but I am happy to discuss this matter with her further.
Gareth Bacon.
Mr. Speaker, I refer the House to my register of members' interests. Point 13 of the first phase of the Gaza peace plan negotiated by the United States is very clear that Hamas must disarm, dismantle its terrorist infrastructure and play no role in Gaza's future. The government have expressed support for this, and they are right to do so. But Hamas have been equally clear that they are not going to disarm, and every indication is that they are doing the reverse. So what steps will the government take to ensure that the removal of Hamas and the demilitarisation of Gaza become a reality?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I was discussing precisely these issues yesterday. Hamas must disarm. There must be a process by which their weapons are decommissioned. There are discussions ongoing on those questions. Hamas must agree voluntarily to disarm. That is vital. It is a key component of the 20-point plan. And without agreement on that point, it will be difficult to make progress. I was discussing that with a range of our international counterparts yesterday, and we will continue to remain very focused. Mr. Speaker, may I take the quick opportunity just to correct? Okay.
Thank you. On Sudan and that failing international response, can I ask the Foreign Secretary whether she'll consider further economic measures and sanctions, including against the nationals of the countries that are supporting the belligerents? And will she encourage the Prime Minister to prioritise Sudan in his international engagements so he can show the leadership that she has? Thank you.
No problem. Foreign Secretary.
I can assure my honourable friend that my right honourable friend, that we are continuing to raise this as well. And we assess that there are around a dozen countries
countries that are providing different kinds of arms flow support in different ways to the warring parties. That is an extremely serious concern, and we are raising it with a whole range of different countries. We are also continuing to look at the issue of sanctions.
Sir Andrew Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Following the Minister's answer to question 1 on illicit finances, we still don't have publicly accessible registers of beneficial ownership in the overseas territories. Nearly 10 years after this House passed the necessary legislation and made clear they must be set up. When will the government put its foot down and say enough delay, enough obfuscation, open up these registers to proper scrutiny fully and now?
Minister.
Well, he will know that we do have publicly accessible registers in some of the overseas territories, in Gibraltar, in Montserrat, and there's been welcome progress on legitimate interest access registers in a number, including in recent weeks. But I absolutely agree, we need to go much further forward. We're working very closely to ensure that this progress is there, and I've set out my expectations very clearly.
Elizabeth McAllister.
Speaker, I have always been assured by both the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary that the case of my constituent Jagtar Singh Johal, arbitrarily detained in India now for 8.5 years, would continue to be raised at all levels. I understand that the Foreign Secretary met with her counterpart, Jai Shankar, on 2 occasions recently and was not able to do so. So can I have the Foreign Secretary's assurance that she remains committed to raising Jagtar's case and is actively working to secure his release?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for his question, and I can give him the assurance that we do continue to raise the important case of Jagtar Singh Johal and to seek a resolution to his case as soon as we can. Thank you.
Robert Jenrick.
Last month, the United Nations General Assembly voted to demand that countries, including the United Kingdom, pay reparations for slavery. Astonishingly, the Foreign Secretary instructed our ambassador to abstain and to issue a pathetic hand-wringing statement which failed to mention the United Kingdom's unique role in the eradication of this great evil. Are we a punchbag, or are we a great, proud country? Will the Foreign Secretary explain her decision and state to the House unequivocally that the United Kingdom will never pay a penny of British taxpayers' money in reparations?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are, of course, against reparations, and when he was a member of that party, I think he was against them, but who knows what he's for or against now? Goodness only knows. Let's face it, Mr. Speaker, he's just got his clip for social media, which is all this response deserves.
Ewan Steinbank.
March was one of the deadliest months on record for settler violence in the occupied West Bank. For communities such as Jais, life is becoming intolerable. Going further than the diplomatic pressure currently being exerted, will the government expand sanctions for the many Israeli officials explicitly and brazenly empowering settler violence against Palestinians in the West Bank?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for raising this important point. As I said earlier, this remains utmost in our minds. We discussed it with our partners yesterday. He will know, as he's heard ministers say from this dispatch box before, we won't speculate on further sanctions, but we treat this issue with the seriousness it deserves.
Matthew.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Foreign Secretary has made it clear that a ceasefire in Sudan is a key priority. In the light of the Berlin Conference shortcomings, can she detail the diplomatic, economic and political levers she is using to bring an end to the violence, particularly with the UK allies, including the UAE, with direct stakes in the war? Thank you.
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I can tell the honourable member that as well as discussing this intensively at the Berlin conference, I've also discussed this with the UAE Foreign Minister, who I met a couple of days ago, and I've also discussed it with the other members of the Quad of countries, including the US, Saudi and Egypt as well. And we are continuing to work not just with the Quad, but much more widely to engage all countries in pressure to get to a ceasefire.
Greg Smith.
Mr. Speaker, can the Foreign Secretary give a guarantee that there is nothing in the so-called reset negotiations with the European Union or the rumoured reset bill that is incompatible with Section 38 of the Withdrawal Act?
Minister.
The Minister of the Cabinet Office has set out answers to those questions.
Sir Julian Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Foreign Secretary accept that as a matter of objective fact, this House was misled about the circumstances of Mandelson's security vetting, even if that misleading was inadvertent?
Well, the House
Foreign
was not
Secretary.
given the full information. It is important that it should be given the full information, and I have undertaken to write to the Select Committee ensuring that full as well as accurate information is provided.
Jim, oh, sorry, Carl Lockhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the UK, we pride ourselves in allowing people to practice their religion freely. Can the Minister update the House on what he is doing with any new regime in Iran to protect the rights of Christians to worship openly there?
Minister.
Freedom of religious belief continues to be a very important issue that the Foreign Office pursues with vigour. I'm very glad that we're joined in the Chamber by our envoy on that question. We have raised questions of freedom of religious belief with the Iranian government on countless occasions. It is clear, given the scale of restrictions that the Iranians have put on their own people, that they are not listening to the United Kingdom's advocacy on these questions, but we will continue to raise these questions and pursue it with our partners.
That completes, and I think the Minister wants to make a point forward. A point forward, Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I just wish to correct the answer I gave the Shadow Foreign Secretary in relation to the Iranian appointments. While it is true that our diplomats have raised concerns about human rights issues in general, the Foreign Secretary has not herself raised within the United Nations the question of this appointment. There has been no opportunity for her to do so.
Right, that completes questions. Let the front bench change over.